let's look at the workflow here. You've got three things left to right. So the workflow seems to be like we're going to go left to right, right? So the first thing, if I click the drop-down list here, I choose essentially a file format, which makes sense. What kind of a file do I want this to be? And it shows whatever I did last. And so most folks will take H.264, which makes MP4 files. What is confusing for some people is that this is a codec which you can use inside QuickTime. So for example, if I choose QuickTime, then later on I can choose the codec. That'll be the MP4 codec. So now if I click on the hot link here instead of the drop-down list, this is the one little kind of confusing thing about the Media Encoder. Here you are on the Media Encoder. You think you're going to do everything here inside the Media Encoder, but I click on this hot link here, and it opens up another piece of software. It opens up the Export Settings dialog box, or it could be, it looks like a separate program. So this is the sort of extra layer of complexity when you use the Media Encoder. But anybody working with Premiere Pro will have seen this a zillion times, and so it's a familiar kind of a thing. But this is where you get to really fine-tune how you're going to work with, let's say, QuickTime in this particular case. So there's the so-called format. QuickTime is a container in which you put a file, basically. So QuickTime, AVI, those are containers, but just universally referred to as a format. And there's the format QuickTime, and then I can have presets, but I'm going to use a custom approach. And to do that, you go down here and you can choose a codec. And if I go down here, I can choose H.264. Isn't that confusing? So you can create a QuickTime MOV file. It's called QuickTime makes .mov files. You can create a QuickTime MOV file, and then you can use the H.264 codec inside that container. So you can either create an MP4 file directly, or you can create an MOV file with H.264 as the thing that will be the compression decompression scheme that you want to use. So there are obviously other codecs here. Animation is a high-end version for QuickTime. There are other ways to go here, but this will create an MOV file, and a lot of folks work in Macs and they want to be able to, let's say, edit this thing in Final Cut Pro, so you can output it as an MOV file as opposed to, let's say, an H.264 MP4 file. So that's a way to go here. You don't have to export it out as an MP4 file if you want to use the H.264 codec. It is a little confusing, I admit. So I'm going to change this to something else. Notice that we also have a AVI, which we had earlier. This AVI uncompressed is an option. You could go to AVI and select uncompressed, but if you click on that, it automatically makes it uncompressed. And so right now, though, it chooses the typical AVI output of 720 by 480, though. That's the default setting for AVI. So if you want to get back to the HD project that this thing is, you need to click on this, unlink it, and change those numbers. So that's a preset, basically. If I go over here, I can choose, if I were going to put this at the Blu-ray, I choose MPEG-2 Blu-ray. But the thing is, if I were going to make a Blu-ray disc, I would use Adobe Encore to do that, and I could link to this project inside Adobe Encore as well. So again, I'd rather have Adobe Encore be the thing that renders it out for Blu-ray, but you can do it in advance here as well, just so you know. And it has some presets for that. Now, so let's say you choose one of these guys. I'm going to choose H.264. That's the one that most people will use. By the way, there's now H.265, which is the newer version for some cameras, but H.264 is the sort of default MP4 process. And notice that it automatically gives it an MP4 extension there. So you do that. So you select the format, which we did basically over here, but now you notice it's going to change when we go back. And I want to give it a preset, or I can do some custom settings down here. The preset that I use almost always is match the source high bitrate. That means it's going to take the source size, the frame rate, and make it look as good as it can inside this compressed format. H.264 is compressed. And I got a question, let me check it here. What format, so a couple people ask, what format has the best compression and quality, and what's the advantage for QuickTime over going direct with H.264? Okay, so first of all, what format has the best compression and quality? Hard to say, because if I choose H.264, for example, which is the de facto go-to format for things like YouTube and Vimeo, what have you, once you choose that, you can choose to update how well it's compressed, how deeply it's compressed. So these are the video settings for that. But you can say, it says target bitrate down here. I want to increase the bitrate. I want to have it be really high quality, which means that it's going to be a larger file. And instead of what's called a variable bitrate, VBR one pass, I want to have it be two passes, which means that it's analyzed twice before it's actually created. So it's hard to say which one's best because you can adjust the settings to improve the quality or reduce the quality once you choose a codec. So there's no simple answer to that question, even though it's a simple question. My go-to approach is to use H.264. It's so standardized across so many platforms that I just use that. And then I tend to go with VBR one pass, which is the standard. It means variable bitrate one pass. CBR means constant bitrate. You want it to be variable because you want to analyze what's going on in the video. If something very simple is going on and the scene doesn't change, then it'll have a lower bit rate because not much is going on. But when things are complicated and a lot of action in the scene, then it'll have a higher, it'll see that and it'll adjust it accordingly when it's making the compression. So it'll increase the number of bits at that particular moment when it compresses it. So I choose variable bit rate one pass, but if I want to up the ante a little bit, I do two passes. It just takes longer. It doesn't make a bigger file. It just takes a longer because it analyzes it twice. Then you can increase the bit rate to have more bits per second, and that will increase the quality as well, but increases the frame size. Right now it's 2 megabytes, right? If I take this thing up a lot, you see it's now 44 megabytes, right? For that little simple animation here, which is crazy, right? It's just a few seconds of some letters. So you can change the bit rate here. The standard bit rate is around 10 or so for a pretty good output. So I'm setting it to 11 here right now because I just couldn't get it back to 10, but that's how it works. Excuse me.